In this episode of the Wired for Adventure podcast, I sat down with Nick Sanders to talk about his upcoming world e-bike ride. Enjoy. You are very well known, especially around our offices, for riding your motorbike all around the world and in lots of exciting places. But you started on a push bike. What's made you come back to the idea of cycling more traditionally?
I've always been a cyclist, and I like the physicality of it. And I literally like the boost of hormone generation around my body. It makes me feel good when I'm on the bicycle. That doesn't mean to say that it doesn't happen on a motorbike. It clearly does. But, you've got to ride further. I mean, I have to ride 1,000 miles on a motorbike to get the same feeling I get on riding a bicycle, say 100 miles. Sure. So it both takes 15 hours or 10 to 15 hours. And my heart is I just feel, it goes back to my youth as well, I think, in some ways. I've been a cyclist since I was 12. Sure. And I just love it.
What made you start then when you were 12? What drew you to getting on a bike?
The thing is that you're always looking for ways to either escape or to expand your knowledge, who you are as a person and so forth. I wanted to get away from home life very early on. In fact, funny enough, when I was 3, I was so disenchanted with home life for whatever reason. I was cycling on my trike across Manchester and was brought back by the bin men. Back to home, because in those days they kind of everybody knew where everybody lived. Sure. It was a different world. Yeah. And I couldn't get away until I was about 14 when I started cycling, and that and I was riding 100 miles a day. I had a there's this wonderful geographic wilderness which I wanted to explore. And as soon as I was able to leave home at 18, I went to live in France and I became a racing cyclist. It opened up wonderful corridors that facilitated me to be ambitious, to be good at what I was, what I wanted to be good at. And it allowed me to travel cheaply.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that the cycling was sort of a means to an end, the end being travelling?
I think everything that I do has to have a means to an end. Even now, I don't ride a motorbike just simply for enjoyment.
Sure.
Or rather, can I say this? I do find riding a motorbike or a bicycle hugely, joyful. But it's because it has ulterior purposes.
Fair enough. So, obviously, you were a racing cyclist in France. But what was your first sort of long distance trip that you could count as like adventure cycling in whatever you would define it as?
Well, to go back to, yes, I was a pro cyclist for 2 or 3 years in France, and I came back. I wasn't really good enough to ride the Tour de France, I don't think, or maybe I could have ridden it, but I wouldn't have done anything there really. And I thought, nope, it's no good flogging a dead horse. Let's try something else. So I thought, right, well, I think I'll just go and bicycle around the world. I had this point of epiphany, where I thought I wanted to go and visit places like Lhasa in Tibet, or I wanted to go to find somewhere in the world where I could almost find a point of extreme thought, madness if you like, but that's kind of a bit of a cliche, altered thinking. I was quite into that at the time, an altered consciousness. Whatever you might want to call it. And I just assumed that would be the end of the other side of the world, or the end of the rainbow. Yeah. And I thought, to get to the other side of the world, I could cycle there, I guess, or walk. But I think, well, if I go there, I've got to come back. So I thought, well, why don't I just go around the world on the bicycle? And in the time I've told you this, that was the kind of time it took me to decide to do it. That was epiphany for me, and I haven't stopped.
Right. So would you say you were prepared for that trip, or did you just sort of set off and figure it out?
You're never prepared.
Yeah.
And particularly me, I'm not the most prepared person. I think people think just because I've been around the world on a motorbike so many times, I know how to pack my bags. Well, I guess I do, but it's less is more. I just know what not to take.
Sure. So obviously you're going around the world on your e-bike soon. When are you setting off?
Well, I'm leaving in September.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going on the Yamaha Wabash, which is they've been making engines for 30 years, along with Bosch. But this is their first foray into electric bicycles as an entirety. Oh no, they've been available in the States and Japan for quite a while, but the first time they've come into Europe and the UK.
Amazing. So obviously you just said you've been around the world multiple times. You maybe never felt prepared. Is there anything specifically about taking an e-bike around that is, maybe making you feel apprehensive or?
No, not in the slightest. I think it made Yamaha apprehensive because look, I was talking to other manufacturers and most of them just weren't interested simply because they're nervous about taking an electric bicycle around the world. No one's done it before. Remember, this is a first. And what happens if you take your electric bicycle around the world and it breaks down? I mean, that's not great for the manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
And before Yamaha would say yes to around the world, I said, well, look, let me take it across, the length of mainland Europe, from Nordkap in North Norway down to Tarifa in southern Spain, which is 7,000 kilometers. And they agreed. So that was, if you like, a road test for their Wabash, and it performed perfectly, as I would assume it would. Because one of the things about Yamaha is that more than anything, yes, it makes motorbikes, it makes everything, but it's an engineering company, and that's how it's structured. And their engineering of everything is just, I think, just extremely good.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously performed massively well going through Europe, taking it to places where maybe electric vehicles are less common or they've sort of blown up less than they maybe have in Europe. What's the plan? How will you go about charging it, extending the battery life when you're doing these massive stretches? Well,
the bike will work just as well anywhere in the world as it will across Europe, obviously. A road's a road, a country's a country. The bike itself, I'll be staying in small hotels or youth hostels. We are on a budget. So in a sense, I won't necessarily be staying in campsites where I can't charge up. But it's not just that. I want to sleep well.
Yeah.
And I really do, because I'm averaging 100 miles every single day. That is the scheduled target. Anything less than that. It's already 7 months, you see. It's a long time to be away from home and to be away from my wife and family and all the rest of it. So I think if I were to come down to 80 miles a day, then it's going to add another month to 6 weeks. I don't want to be away for 9 months.
Sure.
So I'm getting quite fit now. One of the major characteristics of starting a journey like this is starting the journey quite fit. Because when I started in Nordkap, I was 7 or 8 kilos overweight. It soon came off, and I got down to my best ever weight since I was 18 years of age, and I'm 65 now, and I came down to 10 stone, 13 pounds, and I was zooming along. So there's no point drilling holes in your brake levers and sawing bits off your whatever.
Sure.
That doesn't make any difference. You have to take off kilos of weight from your own body and then really pack in a kind of microscopic way, and that's what will make the journey increasingly efficient.
So obviously this is a world first.
It's a solo,
yes, but you also set the world's first on a non-e-bike.
Well, the thing is, I think one of the things that perhaps I'm good at, or I've become good at, simply because I have to live out of the box slightly, we have to do a little bit of sky blue thinking, is that I need to find out what hasn't been done before and what I'm capable of doing. So when I decided to motorcycle around the world faster than anybody else, it surprised me that nobody else has thought about it. But when you think about it, why would someone want to go around the world in, say, 31 days, as I did on the Triumph, or 19 days, as I did on the R1, when you're using the same amount of money as you would need to go around the world in 2 years and have a really nice time?
Yeah.
So my objectives were always different to if you like, other adventurers.
Okay.
When I bicycled around the world, I did it the first time in 1981. I did it at 138 days. The record was 143 days, so I got very close to that figure. So I thought I might as well go for it.
Yeah.
And then when I did it again in 85, I did it in 79 days because it sounded good around the world in 80 days. And you divide the mileage that I had to do around the world into 79 days, and it came up to 171 miles every day.
That was pretty incredible, actually. So has it always been about records? Because I've seen you say that there was lots of showmanship around it. Back in the day, like to get sponsorships and stuff. I've seen you do stunts on tandem bikes and all that sort of thing. Is that still the case?
Less so. I'd like to think I didn't need to do all that after all the experience I've got. I mean, I remember cycling around the world, or about to cycle around the world from London, and in 79 days, and we had a lot of sponsorship, and Spa, the greengrocer stores, were looking after me and so on. And I said, look, I'm not quite sure. I'm not confident that the papers are going to like just me, even though it's a credible journey and it's great fun. You know, and I was fit as a flea, as only a 27-year-old lad. I said, but Miss World is English at the moment, so, you know, maybe we should hire her to send me off. Now, this was the 80s. You were allowed to do that kind of stuff then. We didn't know any better. And as a consequence, we got into every national newspaper with Miss World setting me off. So, yes, of course, great fun. But when you think about it, it's a bit rough on me. And when I came back, they asked me to do silly things, wear top hats and all the rest of it. So they treated this great feat in a kind of clownish manner. I went along with it. Why not? Yes, well, you know, I'm not being precious about it. But I'm not quite sure whether I've ever been taken credibly by major media for the kind of stuff I do. And having said that, perhaps I ask myself kind of rhetorically, maybe why should I be credible in that sense? I don't save lives. I just, as Joey Dunlop said, he just rides a bike and a bit fast like. I ride a bike, but a bit far like.
Yeah, I suppose so. More generally, how do you think adventure cycling or sort of these circumnavigations have changed? Obviously, you know, we've got phones and satellites and all this stuff. What would be the biggest change in your opinion? Well,
everything's changed in that sense, you know. In my time, there were no video cameras, there were no computers, there were no mobile phones. If you wanted to receive news from home, my dad would, for example, send me a letter and it would go to a poste restante. Cardboard box, maybe in a major post office saying Kathmandu, gathering dust, be there for about 2 months waiting for me, and I'd go there and I'd collect it. And I'd say to the clerk, have you got anything for Sanders, please? And hopefully there usually was, and then I'd read him a letter, I'd dust it down, and my dad would say, this is a really boring letter, and I must say it was the most boring letter that I've ever read, but I'd read it 100 times.
Sure.
And I smelt it, and I could smell him, and that's how it was in those days, not so far away. Now you get an email, you don't bother reading it. So I think what when I motorbiked across Russia to Mongolia, you know, I didn't understand a single syllable of the Cyrillic language. Yep. So how am I going to get to a hotel when I can't speak Russian, no one speaks English, and I don't have anywhere to get me there? Difficult. Now you just go onto booking.com. You use Google Translate. You've got your GPS to take you where you need to go. And if you've got a problem, you dial in your spot navigation system. It couldn't be easier. Yet at the end of the day, you've still got to get the job done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So with all of your experience, what country would you say is the best to cycle around, and what country would be the worst or the most difficult you've been able to get?
Well, if it's for cycling as such, in terms of safety, obviously you can't beat the Netherlands. Or having said that, when I rode across Europe, I was astonished to find out how many cycle lanes there were all the way across Europe. I didn't have any special navigation kit. I just used my Google Maps on my phone, and I just used the cycle icon. And so there's no prep, no planning.
Sure.
Which should be encouraging for listeners, because I didn't want to spend hours and weeks, you know, planning a route turn by turn. And I followed the icon and I trusted it, and pretty much 99 times out of 100 it was absolutely spot on. I'd suddenly go right across a field thinking, what the hell am I doing? But it's going to cross a bridle path. And then after the bridle path it would go through a forest, and after that somewhere else by a lake. And I hadn't seen cars all day. It was magical. Absolutely one of the greatest experiences of all my journeys. The simple journey across Europe on a gravel bike. It was great, yeah. So I'm looking forward to replicating that around the world.
Is there a country that was particularly difficult to get across?
I'm not sure I've got to that point yet. Certainly in Europe, no. It's all very straightforward. But I'm anticipating it's not going to be easy, say, across India. I'm not sure that they're into cycle paths just yet. Sure. That's something that has to evolve.
Yeah. Well, maybe you'll start this revolution across India for cycle paths.
I'd like to think so, but I doubt it.
So you say it's coming easier. Obviously, you can pop the cycle icon on your phone and anyone can sort of start cycling. Say there's someone listening or watching who wants to really get into it, start cycling around the world. What would be a piece of advice you'd give them, whether that's about packing or route planning or just getting over that fear barrier to go and do it?
Yeah, it's a psychological thing, prep, that they need to sort themselves out, not to overcomplicate the story. Everybody could do it. Everybody doesn't have to do it. You don't have to go as far as around the world, right? Start off, you know, if you want to eat an elephant, you start off at the toes.
Sure.
Unless you really want to go head first into it, in which case, good luck.
Yeah.
Chances are you'll be fine. The world is a very fine place, and the majority of people are absolutely beautiful and will look after you. As we all know, you very rarely hear of adventurers coming to a sticky end. I mean, yeah, sure, they occasionally get killed by trucks and so forth, and that is the biggest issue, but it's not a people problem. I've travelled everywhere, as you know, many times in difficult places like Mexico at the height of the cartel situation. Why would they want to hurt me? I have nothing. They're much richer than me. I have nothing that they need, you know. So I think the thing is, think very carefully about how far you want to go first time. Think about who you're leaving behind, you know, what you got to come back to, the pros and cons, what you're going to lose, what are the pluses, and, you know, what are the losses. When I hear of motorcyclists, families, couples, say, selling their house to go around the world, I think be very careful about that, because there's no money out there. There's no sponsorship, hardly. You won't. Why should anybody give you money to go on holiday? Let's be real about it.
Yeah.
If you've got a unique view that you think we all want to watch, read, or listen to, then great, go for it. But otherwise, you're going to get swamped in the white noise out there.
So when you first started out, say on your first trip, you weren't selling your house, you weren't pawning anything to go. How did you sort of get started on when you just decided you were going to set off?
I gave myself no options.
Okay.
Because remember, in the early 80s, I was pioneering ultra-endurance bicycling at the time. That's not to say that it hadn't happened before. It had. There were many great round-the-world cyclists at the turn of the century and so forth, and even during the wars. But I reinvigorated the concept, along with a very good friend of mine, Nick and Dick Crane,
Yes.
when they were bicycling to the top of Kilimanjaro. They were my great rivals and friends. I would cycle to the source of the White Nile whilst they were going to the centre of the geographical centre of the earth. I would be either cycling around the world in 79 days or somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we kind of, we parried against each other for quite some time. And we were the only ones doing it, mostly. There's a few ladies doing it, like Bettina Selby and so forth, but we ostensibly were right at the top of it at the time. And after a while, we both realised, and I realised in particularly, that there's nowhere else for me to go. I'd cycled across the Sahara to the source of the White Nile, the length of the Americas, around the world twice, across Asia. God knows, I've forgotten. Around the coast of Britain twice.
Yes. So, and obviously you're right in saying that, you don't often hear about huge tragedies happening to adventurers while they're away, but I have read about you getting into some sticky situations. A story about being held at gunpoint in Uganda comes to mind, or when you attempted to summit, my pronunciation is going to be terrible, but just Del Salado.
Very good, yeah.
Oh, thanks.
There were 3 occasions when I nearly came a cropper. And of course, I think the gunpoint thing in Uganda was the fact that because it was part of the Commonwealth, I didn't need a visa. Because I didn't need a visa, I'm inherently lazy, so I didn't do any research. And I didn't even know Uganda was having a civil war. Okay? So when I crossed the South Sudan border, already the journey was pretty extraordinary, cycling down through Egypt and through Sudan, across the Nubia, following the railway track to Khartoum and Omdurman, and then going into Juba down in the south, into as is now South Sudan, and then coming to the border. And I suddenly saw, burnt-out trucks and tanks and things, and it dawned upon me that the civil war was absolutely full on. And the Bomba road from the Gulu provinces in the north down to Kampala was the most dangerous road in Africa, but I was committed. And again, naive and not arrogant, but a little bombastic. It's not my war. They're not going to bother me. And also nothing to lose. So I cycled through there, and I crossed the front line, and the guys there got hold of me, and it put a gun to my head, and I don't know whether they were serious about it, but it seemed very serious at the time. But I mean, in the Luwero province at that time, as I passed it, 1,800 people had been macheted to death. They'd been dragged off the bus, and I was the only white person on the bus, and they left me on the bus and sent the bus on ahead. And I found out later on everybody on that bus had been killed. So that was the Uganda incident. There was a Mexican incident when my driver was kidnapped by cartel members. He took my vehicle, the trailer, 2 of my clients' bikes, a lot of money in the van, and we didn't see the driver. We didn't see Jim again for several days. I had to go and get a taxi ride for 300 kilometers to go and find the man. We sent out a notice to all the local police offices around Mexico, and eventually we found him. I don't know why they didn't kill him, but they didn't. Yeah. He was traumatized. We sent him home. I didn't get the van back, but we carried on with the journey. Yeah. And the Ocos del Salado is it was at the time thought to be the highest mountain in the Americas. It's probably the second highest by a few meters to Aconcagua. And I was desperate. Look, I wanted to start a new television series called Hot Air. To fly people like celebrities like Victoria Wood and Ian McGaskill, the weatherman, and Tessa Sanderson, the javelin thrower. These are iconic figures. And David Bellamy. So I would fly them in a hot air balloon over where they chose, and we called it Hot Air. It's like a chat show in the air with me, Saturday mornings TV. But I needed a red balloon without, and just to wind back a little bit further, I got into flying a hot air balloon with Spa. Having bicycled around the world in 79 days, they said, "What do you want to do next?" I said, "Fly a hot air balloon." So I did that. Great job. But the red balloon had no sponsorship, so it was a BBC thing, really, wasn't it? But in order to get the money for that, I cycled across the Sahara, and Rally Bicycles only gave me £1,500, and I think they felt they were a bit tight. So when I asked them, I said I was going to cycle to the highest mountain, that we knew that you could possibly cycle up. They gave me more. They gave me enough money to buy a hot air balloon. But when I got up to Aconcagua, it was covered in snow. Again, poor research, poor prep, typical of me. So I said to the bloke at the bottom, "Do you know any other mountains in the Andes where I could cycle up, which, pretty credible?" And he said, "Well, yeah, go up to Copiapo. And there's one that's over 23,000 feet. So I cycled up to Copiapo, and then I cycled up to the Altiplano at 15,000 feet and stayed in a small refugio. And there they gave me some information. And I cycled. I just saw in the distance the outline of the summit, and I just went in a beeline. And I was already suffering for altitude at that point, and that was at 15,000 feet. Then I got to 22,500 feet. I nearly summited, but I lost it. And I just put the bike somewhere, and I thought, I'll run up. I'll put my camera somewhere that's too heavy. I'll just go up. And I put my tent. I'll go and have a sleep. And I got up again. And by the time I looked around, I didn't know where I was. I lost everything. Passport, the lot.
Oh no.
Yeah, it took me 2 days to get down. I nearly died. But it's all part of the preparation of being an adventurer, right?
Yeah. You got to be ready for that. So the thread running through these stories is a slight lack of preparation. For this round the world trip, do you feel prepared? Are you ready to run into any active war zones, or are we keeping it a bit calmer this time around?
It was kind of random as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Could you talk us a little bit through your route that you're planning to take?
Yep. I'll be setting off from, I'm actually going to go from home, from Machynlleth in West Wales, and then I'm cycling across country all the way up to Staithes in North Yorkshire, because I'm ambassador for the North Yorkshire coast called Route YC. Now, this is a new coastal area, a new route for people who want to go and visit that area, a bit like the North Coast 500. It's been branded as such. So I'm going to cycle down there, down from Staithes all the way through Scarborough and down to Hull, and get the ferry over to Amsterdam. And then we'll start officially from Amsterdam, I guess, and then I'll head in a straight line to Dubai, which means going to Athens, get the ferry over to Haifa. Yes. And then I'll go across Israel and Jordan, and then across Saudi and into the Empty Quarter, and then into Oman and UAE, and then Dubai. Basically, I'll be retracing a route which I did the other way around on my Tenerife 700 ride when I went around the world. Sure. I came back from India to Dubai and rode home. Saudi Arabia is an open country now. It's not the most exciting of countries geographically. Maybe in the geographic east. Where am I looking now? I'm trying to think. Northwest. Oh, God, no, I've got east-west dyslexia. I really do. Anyway, there are parts which are pretty hilly and lovely. And there are, most of it is just flat and less lovely. Sure. But one thing I've noticed in Saudi Arabia, whatever you read about in the papers, is that the people are so incredibly friendly. Incredibly friendly. unbelievably welcoming and incredibly safe.
Mm-hmm.
As I proved, you can leave your motorbike with the keys on without any, and it'll be there in the morning. You couldn't do that in Stoke-on-Trent or Bournemouth or where I live.
Yeah. So is there anything that you're particularly excited about? Obviously, you said you've done this route more or less before, but is there anything you're really looking forward to?
No, I'm excited about all of it.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah.
That's what we want to hear.
Absolutely. No, I'm not at all complacent about it. Every single day will be wonderful. And you see, the thing is, as soon as you slow down and as soon as you get away from, where the world is constructing itself or destroying itself, and you get back to nature, you suddenly find that everything is magnified. You start to see things in a different way. You'll sit by a stream and you'll have a few thoughts and you'll drink your water and that's all you need from the day. You'll get your drone out, you make a few pictures and so forth, you write your blog and, rinse and repeat. Yeah. And that's all I'm doing. It's boy's own story, really. It's all to do with, it's all to do with what makes a good story. Basically, I'm a storyteller. And as I said here, you've got 5 acts in a story. You've got the call to action, where you set off and you decide to go and do something. And then you've got the dream stage in which everything kind of goes well. It's like a story of Ulysses. Anything, it's Greek mythology, whatever you want to call it. And then you get the frustration stage at which your fortunes take a turn for the worst. You don't know where that's going to be. And then you have to you descend into some sort of nightmarish conflict. And then you've got to find a resolution out of that. Now, they are the ingredients of storytelling. And they're the same the world over. And that's all I'll be doing is evoking that, Maybe my biggest problem is coming to face with our greatest dread, and for me it's normalness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
For me the story is a kind of a thrill ride of control.
So obviously, like we said, this is a world first, and you're not one for normalness. So maybe it's fair to say that finding adventures that no one's ever done before is becoming more of a rarity, right? You have to look in lots of crazier places to find these new world firsts. For you, what do you think the future of sort of adventure travel and adventure circumnavigations look like?
Well, if I were to say that sponsorship and stuff is getting harder and harder, possibly. But then I look back and it wasn't easy for me at the beginning. I remember it was 2 or 3 adventures before I got any money also. And now, no, it's still sometimes hard. I'm very well funded for this project, but it's through because I'm a safe pair of hands. I'm working with people like Yamaha and Squire locks. They're they're the oldest lock manufacturers in the world, and they've been looking after me for the last 2 or 3 years. Touratech, the accessorized company, the accessorized motorbikes, they've been with me for 15, 20 years. And I've had sponsors like IBM, which goes back to a time when, in 1994, I decided to motorbike around the world. That's right, a Triumph, around the world in 31 days. And what happened in 1994? Well, I'll tell you, it was the birth of the internet. So
I'm glad you told me, because I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah, and this was a strange phenomena about to happen, and IBM gave me a ThinkPad and stuck an aerial on my motorbike, and it took an hour to download half a meg photograph, and they gave me a bag full of plugs, and it was very extraordinary. And effectively, I created, and with them, the first circumnavigational blog of any vehicle going around the world. On the internet.
Yeah.
So yes, we had 50 million unique users. So I like that first. I like the freedom. I mean, it comes out of chaos. Let's face it. What should I do now? I don't know. Well, let's think it through, and and there we are. Yeah, we'll go for that.
Yeah. So was the e-bike sort of a natural fit for you? You were like, no one's done this before. Sure, e-bike works for me. Or was there lots of other ideas?
No, it was that. And I'm astonished that nobody has thought about it. In one sense, if it was a young person trying to do it, and I would applaud that, I think it's great. Youth is our future. But, it's going to cost about £6,000 in dispensing and regaining batteries, because I can't fly the bike with batteries.
Sure.
So every time I get to the edge of a continent, I've got to fly the bike. Hopefully there'll be a lot of boats and ferries, but there'll be several flights, unfortunately. So I have to dump the batteries. I'll give them to a Yamaha dealership, and they'll recycle them, and I'll pick up new batteries, wherever I start the journey again. So why would a young person want to spend £6,000 on batteries? You need a manufacturer behind you.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of the cost issues. So unless you're a phenomena or a prodigy or whatever, or you have a great deal of experience, and I'm afraid to say that can take a long time to get. I've been adventuring for 6 months every single year for 40 years, and of every single day of each of those 6 months, I've travelled hard. I don't just go to a beach and hang around for a bit and have a good time and then move on. No, I'm constantly looking for data, constantly looking to fill my assets, great photograph, looking for people to interview and so forth. It's quite a demanding situation. And just to film, even on the motorbike, and the bicycle's the same, I'll be filming for 3 hours a day, more. And then when I get into my hotel, I'll be editing for 4 hours a day to supply my Instagram account and all my social media commitments and so on. And it's extensive, So yeah, I'm very lucky, but maybe they're lucky to have me too.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely, they definitely are. So say you finished your World E-Bike, it's gone massively successfully. Does the idea of traveling a bit more easily appeal to you, or is it always going to be?
I think what we've got with this is the fact that I don't think anybody else is going to be able to ride an electric bicycle around the world before me now. I'm leaving very shortly. So let's assume that I do it and I accomplish it. Then I've done it. That's it. I'll be the first. I'm happy with that. But there will be other journeys I want to do on it. I'll stick with it for a while. Okay. Having said that, we've got a very full calendar because I'll be coming back in April next year. Then I go straight into a journey around the Grand Tour of Europe by motorbike.
Wow.
On my world raid, my Tenerife 700. So I'll be spending quite a long time in Europe. But after that, as soon as I finish that, which will be the end of the summer, we're going straight into a canal boat journey.
Oh, wow.
Because I sailed a couple of canal boats to the Black Sea, which was the longest canal boat journey in the world in 1993. No one had done it before. And the reason they hadn't done it before, because there's a little bit, for example, you've got the western seaboard where all the water drains to the west from roughly southern Germany all the way down to Rotterdam and to the North Sea. Then all the way east, all the way down, Eastern Europe down to the Black Sea. And there are rivers and canals and the Main, the Meuse, the Marne, the Danube, all the way to southern Germany. And there was a gap there where there was no connection between that, the River Main, and the River Danube. So Charlemagne tried to build one about 1578 and failed, and there were a number of other attempts. But it wasn't actually completed as a canal, which was the main Danube canal link from about Würzburg to Passau on the Danube, 170 odd miles. And that wasn't completed until 92, so you couldn't do it. Now I spotted that, and I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, there's a journey here. And so I did. So I got to the manufacturers, the canal boats, and I said, let's work it together. And you have this kind of pyramid salesman kind of thing. I wish I was good at making money as I was at getting adventures together. But then if I made money, I'd just go and spend it on adventures anyway. So I've just kind of, missed all that need for money. And so I got the boats, I got the steel, I got the engines free, I got the painting free, I got everything sorted out. And I got the sponsorship from Wolverhampton and Dudley Breweries, because it's the Black Country to the Black Sea, okay? Now, there's a lot of alliteration there.
Yeah.
So I needed another B, which was beer. And so Wolverhampton and Dudley Breweries gave me Banksy's beer. So it's the Banksy's Black Country to Black Sea Expedition. Bingo.
Oh, perfect.
I know.
Lovely.
It was lovely. And it was the longest boat journey in the world. And I got there, I had 2 crew, and we sailed all the way there, bashed down the Danube, got down to the Black Sea, and then when we turned back, what I hadn't worked out was how to get home. Because I thought, great prep, right?
Yeah.
So there we are. So you're doing 8 knots, in deep water with your 2LW Gardner at 1250 RPM. Tonk, 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 tonk. I can't remember what the horsepower was, about 28. And as the Danube's doing 8 knots, you're basically steadily going backwards at full speed. So I had to hitch a lift, which I did. With the Romanian push tug. Yeah. And they gave me a lift and towed me all the way up to Regensburg in Germany and released me, and that's how I got back.
Wow.
I've still got the boats. But the point being,
the
point being, we're going to, the Canal and River Trust are running out of money. Okay. The government grant for the restoration of the canals and so forth isn't as good as it could have been. So we're going to try and save the canals, or bring the canals to the attention of, if you like, of mainstream.
Oh, amazing. Sounds like you've got an incredible year lined up. You're making me very jealous. But that is all the questions that I have for you. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Would you like to tell people where they can find you and follow you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, please find and follow me for the next bicycle journey on Instagram, and they'll find me at Nick Sanders Official, or go to nicksanders.com and you'll find everything there. Thank you very much.
Amazing. We'll be following along. You can also read this interview in written form in the next edition of Wired for Adventure magazine, which you can find at wiredforadventure.com. But yeah, thank you so much for speaking. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.